Welcome to Scouting for Growth. Today, I'm meeting with Erlijn Sie, a seasoned social entrepreneur, leader, and social business advisor. Erlijn wrote an interesting book on reimagining financial inclusion, a must-read for all corporate business leaders concerned about the future of our planet. In the book, Erlijn talked about the 5 levers that change and impact our financial system. She will share more about the topic during our conversation. We'll also talk about ESG with a focus on social innovation and how social innovators support companies in the achievement of their impact. So let's get started. So good morning, Erlijn. Thank you so much to be with me today.
Good morning, and I'm so happy. Thanks for inviting me.
Pleasure. So let's get started with some definitions. So I think when we look at the work you are doing, you are focusing a lot on social innovation. But to give context to our discussion, I would like to introduce what ESG means to our audience. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. Environmental meaning the criteria would look at the impact of resource consumption from businesses on the environment, like waste, carbon footprint, water discharges. The social criteria stands for how businesses interact with the local community. And today, I think we hear a lot about how business embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion as well, and embed that within their policies internally. And then governance relates to the internal practices that a business implement to actually make sure that whatever they develop from a E and an S viewpoint can be replicated over and over with good structure, good governance, and good processes. So ESG facilitates top-line growth as well long-term. And I think a lot of businesses are realizing that today, but do not always know how to go about it. So, Erlijn, I would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience with your own words as well. And then we'll dive into the conversations of today.
Yeah. Okay, let's get started. How long would you like me to take to get my introduction done? No, I'm just kidding. I like the hook of the ESG. I indeed have to admit that I'm mainly focused on the S. I personally feel that the social thing goes first, and that has a lot to do with the fact that if you take the social part and take it from a global perspective, you can see that we actually would love everybody to live their life to their full potential. That basically means you and me, but also all the people in the impoverished communities around the world. So without all of us taking care of the planet, so we can't do that without living our life to our full potential. So that's why I usually put the social before the, that's required sort of as a prerequisite before the environmental and the governance that you explained so well earlier. So how come I came to do that, the social part? I'm not sure. I think it all started with my father, who was born in Indonesia and grew up in poverty. But obviously, I was taken by him to that region on a very early age. So I do think my personal purpose is related to that intergenerational thingy that my father was grown up in poverty. However, I realized that very late in life. So I first started my life as a professional in the corporate sector. So I worked for 10 years within the corporate sector. Mainly, I'm Dutch, so mainly with the big Dutch corporate companies like KLM, Philips, the Dutch National Railways. Well, after a year or 7, 8, I really felt my job becoming more, losing some meaning. So I learned a lot, learned how corporate works, how their global supply chain works, how their communication and marketing strategies work. But I really was looking for more meaning, because it was very profit driven and focused on shareholder value. So that's when I started to, dig in deeper in my own reason for living. And by accident, I became a social entrepreneur. So 20 years ago, I co-founded what we nowadays would call a microfinance institution. So we were providing very small loans to, let's think of Malika in Sri Lanka selling coconuts. But if she could get a loan for 50 euros, she could buy a bicycle. And with buying a bicycle, this is no rocket science, right? She could sell more coconuts in the nearby villages. And we started doing that. And that really led to the insight that with a very small financial support in Malika's life, her children could benefit from that very much. So that's how I became a social entrepreneur. And when I started to incorporate social purpose more in my work with corporates too. So from one, the other thing came, and nowadays I work with Ashoka, which is world's largest international network of social entrepreneurs. And at Ashoka, I mainly work with corporates, so I can support their transformation to become more relevant to society, or you could also rephrase that as grow higher scores on ESG. So that's what I do nowadays. And we always do that in close collaboration with social innovators.
So social innovation entail working with social innovators and helping them provide impact to society, probably in slightly different way than profit-making organization. Am I right, Erlijn? And as a result of that, would it be possible for you to define social innovation for us? And what are the outcomes you see those entrepreneurs, innovators achieving in the world?
Yeah, so that's not an easy set of questions, but I don't really think that profit making should be set aside or so separate from impact making. I think we started organizing ourselves to be more relevant to society. So in essence, that's what organizations do as well, right? Maybe in the last few decades, we became a bit too focused on the monetary side of it. And some companies started to forget about this relevance to society. And I think we all try to find our way back to that societal value that we actually originally all started our organization with, right? So I don't think in that sense the profitability is what makes it different, the big corporate, so to say, and the social innovations. What I do think is what makes social innovations really different is that they do it in such a radically different way. So they basically take some issue that they feel they care about and they feel passionate about. They take that issue and they want to radically solve that issue. So they don't want to sell a product that is less polluting to a solution. They want to solve an issue like deforestation. So that's what we call a social innovation. It has to be something that tackles the root causes of an issue, that really takes a systems view. So you define the problem and you work the solution of that problem in a system view. And that is why they organize different than a classical organization, because they realize that if you want to solve something on a systems level, you really need a lot of partners to work with. Actually, everybody needs to change with you to really eradicate that issue. So a social innovation for me is something some person or a solution, a service, a product that radically changes the system to solve whatever is wrong with it, right? So that let's then illustrate it with an example. Wikipedia, everybody knows Wikipedia, right? So basically, the founder, the social innovator, was really annoyed by the fact that knowledge is captured by usually highly educated professors. They write it down in an encyclopedia, and only the rich people can buy an encyclopedia. So knowledge is made by highly educated people and is only accessible for wealthy people. And this was what really was an issue that annoyed him, because he felt that knowledge should be created by everybody, because everybody is a knowledge holder in itself, and it should also be accessible for everybody. And that's what we mean with the social innovation. So in the early days of Wikipedia, Wikipedia wasn't a sustainable solution, not at all. But because he was so passionate about solving an issue, he started to create and co-create that solution with many, many others in such a way that we nowadays could say that issue is solved. Wikipedia is really a place where everybody can add their knowledge. It's a collective database of all of us, and it's actually accessible to all of us, right? So that's what I would say would be a real social innovation.
And in the case of Wikipedia, I'm sure every Christmas you get your little email, because all of us are using Wikipedia, to remember to make our little contribution to it as well.
Exactly, but I think there's nothing wrong with making a good business model from all around or supporting a social innovation, right? So, but I do feel it should follow the solution, what fits the solutions best. And Wikipedia found a beautiful model for that.
Yeah,
but it didn't start with it. I think that's a very important lesson for all of us to take, that you don't start your way business canvassing through social innovation. You start with the issue, you analyze the root causes, you think about how others can contribute to solving that, because most systemic issues are too big for one of us to solve.
Absolutely.
So the solution needs to be co-created with the people you feel that can contribute to solve the issue.
And you made quite a few important points, because, in the work we do, we always start with problem. We have a problem-led organization. I work only on problem-led mandates. And I think it's very important to actually remember that for finding the best solution, you need to start with a problem. You need to unpack it in smaller components, like the slice of the puzzle, and take one puzzle piece at a time, and start looking how you can actually start identifying assumptions and how you can start answering questions who fulfill different part. You mentioned ecosystems needs. It might be user need, consumer need, partners' needs, corporate needs, but all these need to be unpacked and so forth. And it's why, often when we solve for this problem, we use entrepreneurial techniques, which requires us to look at desirability, feasibility, viability of a problem, which is very much embedded in the way the startup or the founder of an organization think.
Absolutely. And I also think that the entrepreneurial spirit that we often seek when we want to build collaborations with the startups, the entrepreneurial qualities are actually much more needed nowadays than they were, let's say, last decade and last century. And this has a lot to do with the fact, our founder, Bill Drayton, always says this very beautifully. He says, basically, change has always been in the world, right? But it never has been so fast as nowadays. So change is happening so fast that you barely can cope. So basically, the most important skill for all of us to learn is how to cope with with change, how to be resilient, how to be able to constantly adapt to change. And for that, entrepreneurial qualities are very important. And I also would like to add to that, it's not just entrepreneurial qualities to build an organization. No, it's an entrepreneurial quality to solve issues, to change, right? To solve them. And that needs to be incorporated in the way you organize. So I think that there's where the entrepreneurial qualities really come in.
Absolutely. It takes me as well to, as you were talking, Erlijn, is when you look at this entrepreneurial quality, you mentioned the speed of change. I think change is constant now, because with digitization and the fact that everything is transparent, and technology, actually utility is accessible to everybody for a very, very low price. This means that change is constant. Digitization is enabling change to be constant. And at the same time, because we don't often see what is underneath the water, the iceberg metaphor, you have to also deal with uncertainty in a continuous basis as well. And being able to think laterally and not thinking selfishly only about yourself, I think is the best way to start solving bigger problems. So you mentioned ecosystem, and a lot of things we are talking about this year, just this year, Erlijn, is digital ecosystems, which are, interconnecting systems, including people, technology, partners who actually want to solve big problems together and maybe provide a solution, a very targeted solution for one thing within the ecosystem. So they also need to be mutually exclusive, but together, the sum of the part is much bigger than the part alone, which I think is also embedded in the concept of social innovation and the work you are doing every day.
Absolutely. And this is where I really get excited, especially when we also talk about financial inclusion, because I think big, powerful corporates and big business actually nowadays still underestimate the potential of change they could bring, especially, and sorry, but this is my personal passion, especially to financially including the poor. And here it comes, because our formal financial system was built last century when we didn't have the technology as it is nowadays. And like you said, with the technology and the speed of the development of technology nowadays, look at the Aadhaar, the identification system in India, we are way more able to financially include many more poor or most excluded people in the world. So if big corporates start, and I'm not talking about bank and insurers, right? I'm also talking about them, but also big corporates, if they start to see through technology how powerful they could be in the space of financially including so many more people, then we can really transform the system, change the system. So let me demonstrate this with an example. If you look at the big corporate, like Coca-Cola, for example, through technology, they were never, when you do auditing in your supply chain the traditional way, you basically go the way to your factory and there it stops, right? You audit your factory. And this basically means that the biggest number of people that work for you, think of the plastic recyclers that pick plastic from the rivers, bring them to plastic recycle stations and make new bottles from them, they are out of sight for the big corporates like Coca-Cola, right? So now there's a social innovation technology by Banku, and they actually provide an identity through a technology platform, and the identity is with the poor person, with the most excluded person, financially not included. And with that identity through that platform, waste pickers can get transaction history because they bring in the collected bottles, they drop it off at the bottle recycling factory, not even the factory, bottle recycling point, and they get the registration of their transaction, the minimal income they get for bringing the And now you see that with the social innovation of Banco and a collaboration with Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola suddenly is empowered, enabled to include this so-called last mile of their supply chain. And now they see what the, let's say, earning potential of this last mile people living in the last mile is. They can actually start to include them, provide them with the proper income, provide them, banks could step in, or microfinance institutions more likely could step in and offer them loans. Based on the track record of their transactions, they could even maybe get a health insurance scheme, a micro health insurance scheme. So now you really can include this last mile with this technology, right? And this is also a potential for Coca-Cola. They actually started doing this in South Africa, and hopefully when they have a positive pilot phase, they start implementing such a solution in their whole global value chain, right? So there you see how incredibly powerful this collaboration could be between big corporates and social innovators. If you wish to include people and you really want equality, right, for your company employees, but also the ones supplying your company.
Absolutely. And I believe that Coca-Cola have their bottling services in, part of their bottling activities in South Africa, so which makes perfect sense. So you mentioned, Erlijn, that you want to tackle the flows of formal financial system. Can you actually explain a little bit more what that means? Because you already touched upon the fact that we need to build financial resilience for everyone, and not just for people who can afford it, for people actually who cannot afford it today.
Yeah, so like I said, I think we are currently dealing with a formal financial system that basically serves only less than half of our world population. And that's fundamentally wrong, because we all know that financial services, like being able to save your money on a safe place, getting a loan, getting an insurance, a mortgage, pensions, all those financial services you need to be able to live your life to your full potential, right? So if you exclude more than half, and I'm repeating this because it's ridiculous, right? If you're excluding more than half of the world's population from that system, you're sort of, well, let's think of it as that's a waste of talent, right? So therefore, I really feel that we need to adapt the formal financial system in such a way that we can also include the other half of the world. We can only do that if everybody, all companies, start to work with us on that and tackling those flaws. And most of the flaws that are built in our formal financial system are actually because the last century technology didn't allow us to include them affordably, so to say. But nowadays we can. And that's why I wrote the book about reimagining financial inclusion. And I featured exactly that one. I featured 13 of the game changers in the book that demonstrate how you can also provide micro pensions and provide micro insurance schemes for health, micro insurance schemes to buy crop guarantees, mortgages. So to show that it's already possible, probably I was hoping that others can sort of start to think about it, how they can tag along, because all the game changers, that they have one similar feature, and that is that they invite others to tag along and to sort of take their solution and do it yourself in your own geography too, or in your own supply chain too. So that's how I hope to solve those flaws of the formal financial system, as aiming to include the other half.
So what got you on the journey to writing Reimagining Financial Inclusion, Erlijn? One day you woke up and said, okay, I'm going to write a book. I think it's part of the journey you have gone in. And so give us a little bit of background and the history of the book as well.
Yeah, like I said in the introduction, I sort of by accident became a social entrepreneur because I felt like I needed more meaning in what I did from day to day. So that's when I founded this microfinance institution, providing very small loans to the most excluded people. So 20 years afterwards, so I ventured slowly into the system-changing social entrepreneurship sector. But when I revisited the financial inclusion space 20 years after establishing that social venture, to set up another or to launch another social venture, I actually realized that this state of the sector was more or less still sort of stuck with providing microfinance credits to the lowest income people of the world. And I really felt that we should really focus a bit more on all the other solutions out there that do way more than just savings and loans, and also provide insurances, pensions and mortgages. And I wanted to demonstrate how you do that through a system change approach, and by building an ecosystem of partners that you can shift even the financial system. So that's how I then thought, okay, apparently the sector needs to be able to see those examples, and that's how I featured those 13 game changers that show all the system change view and all do this in an ecosystem. So that's how I came to write the book, but that was just a hobby next to to my work.
Yes, like many of us. So part of us, about, when we try to tackle the rules of the game and try to change them, we also need to look at new drivers and new criteria. So it'd be great if we could go through some of those, the one you think are the most important, Erlijn, as well as, how do we start driving better equality and equity in the action we take every day?
Yeah, so in the book, I write about 5 different flaws or levers that we need to tackle, and I think a couple. Let's touch upon 3 of them. Right, one of them, like you said, equality is very important. Right, to get the other half of the world population included, we really need to grow equality in the world, and I think for that, we need to go to the daily lives of the people we like to include. And these are actually the same people that dig the cobalt from the mines that we use in our phones, right? These are the same people that work in the factories to produce our genes, or the same people. 80% of our food is actually produced by these people. So our lives are very much connected to the lives of those people. So I think equality between me and a poor Malika is the connection in through our global value change, right? So I think getting out there, understanding their daily life is the first thing we need to do. And when you go out in the life of the example of Malika I just said, and you realize that she actually she doesn't need a health insurance. She would like to have access to a doctor when her daughter starts to cough, right? And when her daughter starts to cough, she would actually probably, because she doesn't have a general practitioner around the corner of her home, she has a phone, so she probably would like to call a doctor. And if you start to understand that that's the daily reality of Malika, then you can build a solution like Bima did. Bima is one of the game changers I featured, and they provide all types of insurances through the phone. And for example, the health insurance I touched upon, they actually don't provide the classical health insurance. They do it with preventive health services through telehealth services. So they basically offer access to doctors and health for Malika through the phone. And when she wants to do that and wants to pay a small fee through her mobile phone provider, she can actually get a health insurance with it, attached to it. And that's a radically different way of thinking about health insurances attached to preventive health services through a mobile phone. That's why the game changer of Bima is really taking off and is able to reach 25 million, let me repeat, 25 million users that buy an insurance for the first time in their life. So that's a real huge new market segment, right? And this is only done through getting first a deep understanding of the daily life. And I think that's the first thing that we need to realize, that we don't understand the daily life of the people. And as soon as you get that understanding, you start building the partnerships you need to attach the financial service you want to offer to the fulfillment of the daily need. In this case, it's the mobile phone, right? In the daily life of Malika. I think I mentioned a couple of things. So getting into the daily life, linking with other partners and building the ecosystem to be able to integrate your financial service with the fulfillment of a daily need. And the example I used was access to a doctor, right? So I think that's I bundled some of the flaws in this equality. Yeah.
The example you use, whether that is Bima, reminded me as well M-Pesa. I mean, in our world of insurance or finance, the example which actually I remember probably 10, 15 years ago, I heard first around that social innovation was probably M-Pesa, which allowed, from an insurance viewpoint, a farmer to use their feature phone and a QR code to get their seed replaced if there were a big weather event. And the fascinating process which happened here is that we also had what we call parameters applied to that, which meant that no claims needed to approach a claims department, because we were able to settle claims because Google alert said there's a drought or there is too much rain happening right now. And so what you find is also the operating model of the insurance company changing as a result. And I think the opportunity with potentially social innovation is also learning from developing countries, which had to use feature phone rather than smartphone, being able to innovate around the operating model itself to make the price of the product acceptable too.
Affordable. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. And I think here's another maybe point we could talk a little bit about, because I think what we learned in the last 2 decades, and Acre Africa is one beautiful example to demonstrate. So they sell crop guarantees, right, to farmers, and you can buy them in the same shop where the farmers buy their fertilizer and the seeds for the new season for planting. And they have this technology platform, so you basically only need pictures from the satellite to know whether a farmer's land is germinating or not, right? So that's the only thing you need to know for an insurance, whether you have to go for a claim or not. But the funny thing is that what we learned is it's not only technology. Acre Africa has built a village champion farmers network, which taps into the informal network at the village level. So there are farmers that are champions and that teach other farmers about this insurance, what it means and how you can work with that. But they also added to the satellite pictures, they also take pictures with their phone. Why is it? Because when they wanted to sell the insurances, an insurance is an intangible product. So farmers didn't want to buy it and they didn't believe it. So to add believability to the product of an insurance, they actually built this champion, village champion farmers network, because these are their peers. And they take the picture and they trust them. So trust is a very important factor if you really want to scale the impact and if you really want to reach those people. So again, going back to their daily lives, it also needs believability for them to trust the insurance they buy. And so the pictures that the village champions weren't really needed, but it was needed to build the trust. Yeah. And I think that's a very beautiful lesson for all of us. We have learned in the past 2 decades how to scale this. You really need to also have the trust factor in a local community.
Yeah. But what you are highlighting is that change is then done with committed, collaborative, and connected people. Just the example of the farmers being together and driving that trust, and I guess trust linked to transparency, and so therefore to belief. How do we make that transferable, if I may ask, in developed markets?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me first share a little bit in the underdeveloped markets, because, for example, the Africa example, but also with BIMA, a couple of things you can see, because one of the very often highlighted aspects of BIMA is the fact that they are a technology platform and they do it through that platform. One of the things that is highlighted less is the fact that they have a very strong sales agents network. So they have thousands of sales agents based out there in the communities where the clients live. And I think if you ask me, the USP of BIMA is actually this technology plus the human factor, right? The face that is based in the... So same with Acre Africa, it's an insurance model, but it also has built this village champion network through which they gain the trust of the people. So if I look at that and I study also the other game changers, I notice several things, that the trust is built locally. So the communities, they have strong social cohesion there. And you need to build the trust in their community. So if you reach out through your partners in the communities, that's where the trust is built. So one of the things, how they reach there, the communities, is also through a different way of organizing. So many of the aspects of the organization of BIMA and Acre Africa is done with the clients they serve, right? So the sales network, the sales agents of BIMA are basically living in the same villages as the clients. So you can see that promotion, marketing, sometimes production is done by the people they serve. And that's why you also gain trust and believability. And to do so, you need partners that have a reach in those communities. So I think these are a couple of very important things that you need to know before you want to talk about transferability. And also, I actually do want to take lessons into the developed country, but I actually would like the people in developed countries, to go and reach more into the underdeveloped countries. So I think that's where we should actually focus, a different way of organizing to build this trust. And that usually goes through partnerships and partners that are already having a role, that already interact with the people that you want to include, that you want to equally transact with.
Yeah, one of my acquaintances, a friend of mine, Stéphane, who has been doing a lot of work in the French-speaking African countries, actually showed me that quite a number, in my case, insurance company, are actually doing that leap. And some of them I want to recognize on this podcast, including Swiss Re, Munich Re. I've heard of great work done by Allianz, AXA, Generali, and I know probably many more, but those are the company we've been talking to, who's been appearing on the French podcast as well, that is running for French-speaking African startups. to actually enable them to have a broader voice. But as you said, the insurance company are over there. And they also are learning, I guess, the techniques that developing markets are implementing to be closer to this customer at a macro financing or insurance level, to see whether there are some things we can learn to make our developed market financially resilient. Because as you said, it's not only covering underdeveloped markets where 50% of people do not have potentially a bank account. There are millions of people in developed markets with no bank accounts and therefore no access to financial resilience and living day by day or week by week.
Absolutely true. So absolutely right. And though they need to be included as well. So yeah, absolutely.
So this question I would like to ask you is probably more linked to my world. And those are the questions which come to me all the time at the moment. And I know, Erlijn, that they are potentially environmentally focused. I'm asked often, Sabine, how do we solve for urban risk, climate risk, supply chain risk, digital risk? And so I know often, it's solved right now in my sector, we're good at doing environmental, well as good at doing social, or I would say governance in a new sense of the term. Would you have an example as to how we could do some of this a little bit better?
Well, and apologies for probably a little bit of a disrupting answer here, but I would really like to challenge the ones that popped the question to think once again about how to avoid or how to manage risk. Because I think, going back to the first part of our conversation, we should, obviously, risk management comes with business, I know that. But it should not be about managing risk. It should be about getting people to live their full potential in life, right? And urban risk or climate risk you should actually dig a little deeper how they connect to the lives of the people. Because if we know that the biggest climate risk also in the eyes of insurers is in the underdeveloped countries where the biggest climate risks are. And unfortunately, that's also where the biggest part of our impoverished people live. So if we want them to be agents of our planet, we first need to include them and grant them a proper living, right? And for that, and teach them how they sustainably can take care of our planet. So I think, and then you get a real long-term sustainable climate solution. So that's where I would sort of challenge or appetize you into thinking when people ask you, how do we manage the climate risk? I think you have to go to the iceberg level you just mentioned that goes underwater, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you also highlighted at the beginning of our conversation, is identifying the smaller part of the bigger problem, right? It's really nailing, the underlying whys, right? The 5 whys as to why the systemic issue occur, so that we can actually find better solutions for those. So your last, we are going into the end of our conversation. I was going to ask you about your words of wisdom, actually, Erlijn. So I think we talked about a lot of things, how we can probably build a better society, and also consider social innovation and the impact it creates as potentially a profit-making initiatives, right? At the end of the day, when we talk about sustainability and how we can address the sustainability problem, we talk about people, planet, and profit for some, or partners for others. It's about, getting the right piece together to achieve the outcome. So what would be your last word of wisdom for our listeners, Erlijn, around things they can do today and tomorrow to build a better planet, maybe?
Well, I really like to stress the fact that like we said earlier, it's all about how you build the resilience and to the changing world, right? And there hasn't been a change in the world that didn't happen as follows.
Yeah.
First you change and I change, and then our pack changes, right? And our organization changes, and only then the world or the system changes. And why I'm saying this so explicitly is because I really feel that if you build an environment in your organization, in your business, for example, where your people can really flourish as change makers, so they can really become entrepreneurial, they can really care about the problem and really try to solve it by the roots of it, and they can really build the partnerships they need to solve it, that's when you can really jointly grow to a better world. So I would encourage everybody, also in the position where you're currently in, if you're a researcher, if you lead a team, if you can do something now, and personally I hope you also want to contribute to financial inclusion, you can do something nowadays by building a supportive environment for your team members to start solving issues themselves and contribute to solving those issues on a systemic level, and build the partnerships that are needed to do that. Don't try to do it all yourself. Don't build the corporate ventures department and then try to buy them and incorporate them in your company. Build the collaborations and let there be teams that challenge each other and that dare to say no to things and dare to because diversity is really a big treat, I would say, in your teams, because if you dare to challenge each other, you get better outcomes. So I think investing in people, making them change makers, making them entrepreneurial, allowing them to care for something and to solve it in your company, for your company, that would really make the world a better place, because there's many things we can do, but we can only do it together, and we need to learn how to entrepreneurial, creatively solve those issues together from where you are. Corporates are very strong, powerful entities in the world. So they need to start using that and build the partnership that benefit both their business as well as, you name it, and the environment, the people, the governance, right? Yeah. So that would be my word of wisdom. Create the change makers around you to build a better world. We are all needed to change this system that we are often feel we are caught in, right?
Absolutely. Build the change makers of tomorrow. Thank you very much, Erlijn. So where could our listener find you?
Well, you can find me at Ashoka, and you can also find me at my website, Erlijn Sie, where you can also read a little bit about the book if you like to learn more.
You can also get the book on Amazon, Reimagining Financial Inclusion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sabine.
Thank you very much for being with us today. If you like this podcast, subscribe now, share with your friends, and if you enjoyed it, please give it a 5-star review. Also, if you want to cover any specific subject with me, contact me on Instagram under Sabine VdL Officials or LinkedIn under Sabine van der Linden. Thank you.